Richard, thanks very much for joining us from PwC in Amsterdam. Um, there are significant implications in terms of ESG and taxation for the real estate side. What do you see as some of the key challenges?
Some of the challenges that I see when I help real estate investors and real estate asset managers is that there is no consensus around what is considered the best tax strategy in line with ESG. What I see is that a lot of primarily institutional investors are actually quite advanced in defining what they think is a way of behavior that they want to follow. And what they want to do is bring that on to the asset managers that are managing their investments to ensure that they are aligned with this tax policy. And if you're an asset manager and you have multiple investors, up to maybe hundreds of them, it's quite a challenge to actually bring all these views of all these particular stakeholders that you have and bring it all together in a strategy that basically serves everybody. There's quite a lot of explaining and discussing to be had to actually come to one conclusive strategy.
How does a company, whether that's an investor or an asset manager or a developer, actually begin to implement this?
So a good starting point is actually to gather like an overview of what is already out there in guidelines and what has been published. There's quite a lot of public but also non-governmental institutions that have been publishing all sorts of guidelines. What has happened, and I think that's an interesting one to mention, is that the INREV tax committee actually also worked on a tax code of conduct. Our aim was to take all the different guidelines and bring that all together for the real estate business into a standard guideline that people could refer to, and eventually will help to bring parties together in a consensus way on how to approach implementation of tax code of conduct. So it's the INREV tax code of conduct that can help the real estate business with that and can function as a standard for those that want to take on this topic, but also want to look around them and see what the rest of the business is doing and how can you actually define your own strategy. Also, what kind of governance can you build around that? And finally, and that's also I think an important point, is how do you communicate to your stakeholders or maybe to the public, which is also a broader stakeholder. So there's a guideline, the INREV tax code of conduct, that can be used as a starting point. And what our expectation is that this will help bring a lot of parties together and basically come up with one standard way of looking at this type of implementation.
If you're an asset manager or an investor, what are some of the advantages of this? I suppose, how does it help move things forward?
Well, besides obviously that there's this wish to implement your ESG in your own strategies and your own policies throughout your companies and make sure that your company values are being executed on. Following this tax code of conduct will also bring alignment when you are doing business. So, for example, an investor doing a due diligence on an asset manager currently might bring his own views on policies, and the asset manager will actually need to answer that. If this asset manager already can refer to this standard guideline that's out there in terms of defining the tax policy or the tax strategy, but also an element of governance that is implemented. And finally, and that's maybe the key point, the transparency around it. So how do you communicate that to your investors? If those three topics are covered on both sides of the equation here, then I think there will be an enormous step forward for doing business in the real estate fund business.
Great. Thanks very much for joining us, Richard.
Thank you very much.